Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. Thank you all for being with me today. Happy Monday to you. Now, I want to dig in today, and I'm going to give you my way too early projected 53-man roster. To give this to you, I need to make a couple of things very clear. Number one, I do not believe this is going to be the final 53-man roster as the Raiders get closer to September 10th and kicking off the 2023 season. But it's where I think the roster sits today. I fully expect a trade to come. I'm not reporting anything is imminent or that it's, solid. I'm just expecting it to come. Obviously, I'm referring to the trade of Hunter Renfrow. I can tell you this. A lot of people have tried to make more out of what I've reported. Oh, the Raiders hate Renfrow. Renfrow hates. This isn't a hatred issue. It is nothing like that. And again, if the trade is consummated, and I expect it to happen, I don't have any idea what teams, nothing like that. I'm just saying I would expect after June 1st that Hunter will eventually be traded. But he's on the roster now, so we're going to discuss him because this is the roster as it sits right now. But here's a couple interesting things about the 53-man roster before we get into it today. I expect 10 rookies as of today to make this team. The 8, obviously, I expect it from the draft picks, and I expect 2 UDFAs and McClendon Curtis and Drake Thomas, the linebacker out of NC State, to make the roster. I think Dalton Wagner is a guy that'll make the practice squad. I think he's got to improve some areas in his game. He has all the physical attributes, but there's some things he needs to improve on his game, and he needs to stay healthy. But I think he could clearly play for the Raiders one day. Of the 53 spots, I expect 26 of them to be filled by people that were not on the roster last year. That is a huge overhaul of the Raiders roster. Huge. And again, we'll break in more and get into that as we get through the roster. I want to talk about a couple of other points that I found interesting. Last year, here's how the Raiders broke up the 53-man roster. They had 2 quarterbacks, 6 running backs, 5 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, 8 offensive linemen, 10 defensive linemen, 5 linebackers, 5 safeties, 6 corners, and 3 specialists. I expect them to break it down as follows: 3 quarterbacks, 5 running backs and fullbacks, 5 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, 8 offensive linemen, 11 defensive linemen, 5 linebackers, 5 safeties, 5 corners, and 3 specialists. So let's get right into the roster. Let's start right at quarterback, where obviously the number one guy in the roster is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. The Raiders have put in $70 million into him. They believe in him. They believe he's going to stay healthy, and I'm going to make this prediction right now. If the Raiders have Jimmy Garoppolo for all 17 games, then I expect them to get to my 9-win prediction. If they don't, I think they get to 7. So that was my prediction. The ceiling was 9. The floor was 7. When I make my predictions, I don't take into account injuries. But there you go. Jimmy Garoppolo. The biggest gambler in Las Vegas is the Las Vegas Raiders. Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels. They believe in him. And let's be honest, when he's healthy, he's a guy that's easy to believe in. And he understands their system significantly better than Derek Carr did. And he's good to go. Next, Brian Hoyer. I think the best backup quarterback that the Raiders could have signed. It's going to be a great tutor for Aiden O'Connell. It's going to be a great backup. He knows if Jimmy goes down, they don't have to change one part of the game plan for Brian Hoyer. Not one. Nothing will change. And I think on a team that is not a Super Bowl contender, but it's contending to get better, that's the best you can ask for. And Brian will be a great tutor to Aiden O'Connell. And then third, Aiden O'Connell, I expect him, the rookie out of Purdue, to make it. I know they're very high on him. They got a lot of high thoughts about him, and I think he makes the roster with ease. Next, you come to running back, where there's Josh Jacobs, clearly on the franchise tag. I would not be shocked if he doesn't come back until the start of the season, when he'll start losing game checks. I'm not saying that's what he's going to do. I'm just saying it wouldn't surprise me if that's what he did. But again, we know, I believe he's the best running back, or one of them clearly, in the National Football League. I think he's probably second to Derrick Henry, but still terrific running back. Then you bring in Zamir White, who they love as a runner. They love as a runner, but he's got to improve some parts to his game. And I think he's been working hard this offseason. I'm really looking forward to getting a chance to talk to him at minicamp and spend some significant time with him. But he's going to be there as a running back. Next, I think you're going to obviously keep Brandon Bolden and Amir Abdullah, two guys that do a terrific job at exactly what the Raiders want them to do. They're solid guys. Do you eventually hope to be getting some young guys to take their place? Yes, but not this year. I don't think that's going to happen this year. And then Jakob Johnson, who's one of the best fullbacks in all of the National Football League, I fully expect him to make the roster. So there's your 5 running backs and fullbacks. Then you come in to the 3 specialists: punter AJ Cole, kicker Daniel Carlson, long snacker Jacob Bonemoyer. Again, all 3 very, very good. The Raiders have the best kicker and best punter combination in the National Football League. Cole and Carlson, they are exactly what you think they are. They're game changers. They're automatic guys. When you put them out there, you expect Cole to flip the field and Carlson to get you points. I think when you look at Bob Moyer, the Raiders get rid of Trent Sieg, who was very good. He was very popular with his teammates. So that's always a risk. But at the end of the day, the special teams had to get better. So they bring in a new special teams coordinator. And if they do get better, nobody cares. It's all about winning. And but welcome to the Raiders, Bob Moyer. It's not his fault that they got rid of Trent. And I think he'll be fine as a long snapper. He's very good. Okay, then you come in and you would start getting into some stuff. Trey Tucker, the wide receiver. Fully expect him out of Cincinnati to make the roster. Devontae Adams, come on. Come on. Best wide receiver in the National Football League. Then you got Jacoby Myers. Now, obviously, Devontae's your 1, Jacoby Myers is your 2, and DeAndre Carter is your 3. So then the battle is for that 4th and 5th wide receiver spot. We know Tucker's going to make it, so he's your 4 or at worst 5. Then you come down and you got Hunter Renfrow and Philip Dorsett. Again, reported this for months. I was the first one to report it. I do not expect Hunter Renfrow to be on the 53-man roster when the season starts. So I'm going to give that slot to Philip Dorsett. And not because the Raiders aren't going to cut Hunter, but I'm just saying I expect Philip Dorsett to be that 4-5 guy with Trey Tucker. Tons of speed, super fast, does special teams, does a lot right. And but you got Tucker, who can also take that role too. So it's going to be an interesting spot, but that's how I expect the 5 wide receivers to break down. Then you come in and you get to tight end, where Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, your rookie, he's a great blocker. He's a great receiver. Some point this year, I think he'll be the number 1 tight end. I think he starts, and he's a stud. Then Austin Hooper, which is a guy, they bring him in on a 1-year deal. I would not be shocked after this season if Hooper gets a 2 or 3-year deal to stay. This is a guy, I really like his game. Man, he does a lot of stuff really well. And this was an undervalued free agent pickup by Dave Ziegler that a lot of people, I think, missed. Not missed. I mean, I think they know they signed him, but undervalued. And then O.J. Howard, I expect to be the 3rd. And let's talk about O.J. This is a guy that has all of the God-given features. This guy should be a perennial Pro Bowler in the NFL. The knock is he can't stay healthy. So there's going to be a couple of young guys, one in particular that I think is going to make the practice squad, who could compete. And if OJ goes down injured, I think he steps up and takes that role as a 3rd spot. Then you come in and it gets a little interesting. You get to the offensive line. Colton Miller, one of the best left tackles in all of NFL football. There's nothing to discuss. Jermaine Illuminor, who needs to stay healthy, but he's a guy that worked extremely hard this offseason. He's going to be your starting right tackle heading at this point anyways. He's a guy that the Raiders were willing to try to upgrade at that position. I think he's going to be pushed with Thayer Munford, but he's an interesting player. I like Jermaine personally. I like him as a player. He does a lot of good run blocking. Needs to get better as a pass blocker, but he's on that, and I expect him firmly in there. Then you turn around and start looking at some other guys. Andre James, the center. Now, is this a guy that Grasu or could replace? Is it a guy that maybe they cut him and move Dylan Parham to center? Sure. But I'm saying right now, based on the roster, I expect Andre James to make the team. And I like him. I think he's a good player. I think he certainly was not an elite center last year, but he wasn't bad. And I thought he was continually getting better. So I liked Andre James. Then you come to Alex Bars. I don't know if there is a player on the roster that got more negativity thrown his way. Well, obviously Derek Carr, but Alex Barr's got a ton. And that guy had some devastating run blocks. He's exactly what you need. You can't have, unless you draft really well, and I'm going to talk about that coming up in a few minutes. You can't have all your players be superstars. It just doesn't work that way in the National Football League. And so he's a guy that you pay X amount of dollars. You know what you're going to get. Does he need to get better as a pass blocker? Yeah, he does. And he would tell you that. But he's a guy that I think got a lot of criticism. But remember, he's still blocked for the number one rusher. And let's be honest, I think Derrick Henry's better than Josh Jacobs. I mean, I think they're 1A and 1B because Derrick Henry, everyone knows in basketball, you'll say, wow, this guy's really good. He can create his own shot. Derrick Henry can create his own hole. That's not really how Josh Jacobs works. And I think Alex Barr was a significant contributor. I know he rated a lot higher than a lot of people thought he did. So I have no problem with the Raiders bringing Alex Barr back at all. Then you go get a guy that is an undrafted free agent. I expect him to make the roster, McClendon Curtis out of UT Chattanooga. This kid's a real deal. He's a big one. If he doesn't make it, then I clearly think he'll make the practice squad. But I would be stunned if he gets on the Raiders practice squad and somebody doesn't sign them to his 53-man. I got to look at all the specifics of the practice squad this year if they can protect him. But I really like McClendon Curtis. I know the Raiders really liked him too. They looked at getting back up in the 7th round to pick him. But as the draft just kept folding out, it looked like, okay, we're not going to need to. We're going to be able to sign him as an undrafted free agent. And that worked out. They were rolling the dice and they were sweating that. So that was good for them to get McClendon Curtis. Then you come into a guy that a lot of people are shocked that he's even still on the roster, Brandon Parker. I think Brandon, obviously we know he missed last year. But when he's been healthy, he's played well. I'm not saying he's Colton Miller. I'm not saying, he's Jack Conklin. My buddy, love Jack. But anyways, but what I am saying is Brandon Parker is a very solid, durable guy. He offers versatility, can play a lot of positions, and that's why the Raiders like him. And as of it sits today, I know they would like to upgrade, and I think that they're going to still keep that out there. I expect a trade of Hunter. You're going to see some guys get cut. So again, just telling you what I'm seeing. I think McClendon Curtis makes it. Then you come around, and I already talked about Brandon Parker. You have Dylan Parham, who I think had a very underrated rookie season. He makes the roster, no concerns. Thayer Munford, former Ohio State tackle. He's played a lot at right tackle last year for the Raiders, and they liked what they saw, continually getting better. I think Thayer Munford's back. I think the Raiders are better for it. Then you start moving into the defensive line. You take Tyree Wilson, he's in. Max Crosby, he's in. Chandler Jones, he's in. Those 3 guys are in. Then you add a guy like a Malcolm. And this is a guy that at times has flashed. He's a guy now that needs to show something. This is a critical year in his development in his career. I think you're going to see something from him. Do I expect him to start? No. Do I think there were games he should have started last year over Chandler Jones? Yes. I don't think that you're going to see a whole lot. And now, if Tyree Wilson, and he's coming off that Liz Frank injury, and the Raiders are convinced, as well as every NFL team that I talked to, but I shared a couple of weeks ago in a question and answer article some medical information on Liz Frank injuries in Pro Bowl players, and the odds are stacked against him. But everybody in the NFL I talked to had him cleared. They thought he was fine. The Raiders obviously didn't have any issues, so they went that direction. But do I think Kuntz is going to beat out Tyree? No, but what if for some reason he's unable to play, or maybe he's hampered a little bit? I think Kuntz is a guy you expect to play, and I expect to get good things out of Kuntz. He makes the roster. Then you come down and you start looking at linebacker. I expect undrafted free agent Drake Thomas out of NC State to make the roster. Obviously, he's a potential for a practice squad guy, but I really think he's going to make it. I like his game. You go back, I'm going to challenge it. Put in the tape of NC State. He played Mike, which he's not going to play here, but he has the ability to play Mike. He can play weak. He can play strong. He's really good in coverage. He's not afraid to step up and pound people in the running game. He just screams Raider with his talent. I think that guy's got a good shot at making the roster. Obviously, I predicted him to do it. Then you come in, and obviously, Robert Spillane. This is a guy that the Pittsburgh Steelers did not want to lose. I know a couple people on Twitter have shown me some signings that they had, and they certainly did, but they weren't going to match the money that the Raiders were offering because of their salary cap. Now, they lost some other guys they weren't expecting to lose, so they had some more money to go back and fill some guys in. But, man, they really wanted Robert Spillane. Last 7 games of the year, played every game on special teams, every snap on defense. He's Mr. Durability. The best ability is availability. It's Robert Spillane. And I'm going to say this because I think this is pretty accurate. When you look at his game, now I prefer Denzel Perryman. I think Denzel Perryman was a better middle linebacker. But Denzel Perryman couldn't stay healthy. And how many times have you heard me say the best ability is availability? Denzel didn't offer that. Spillane does. He's a good deal. He's wearing the green dot. He's a great job for the Raiders. That was a good get for Dave Ziegler. Then they go out, and you obviously know they selected Amari Burney. This is a guy that was a former safety, had the best hands on the University of Florida. They wanted playmakers. They were disappointed in the amount of turnovers they created. They wanted playmakers. They got 3 guys that were big playmakers on defense. Amari Burney, the linebacker, great in coverage, can also step up and play the run, can blitz when you ask him to occasionally. He'll make the roster. Then Divine Diablo, he makes it. I know a lot of people don't think they do that he does. I know a lot of people just don't think this kid's going to make the roster. I'm telling you, I do. I think Diablo's there, and this is a big year for him. And then a guy that was a UDFA last year that played really well when he got reps, Luke Masterson. I expect Luke back. I really like Masterson. I love the way he plays the game. I love his vision. He just offers so much. He's great in that mic. So I think you got him behind Spillane. He's a great get, and I think those are your 5 linebackers. Then you come into corner. Rookie, Jacorian Bennett, playmaker. This guy creates turnovers. He gets big hits. Now, I also told you this in my draft analysis. The Raiders watched him because they were looking at another guy on his team that went in the first round. And a lot of teams wouldn't go to him, and they would go challenge Jacorian, and Jacorian penalized him, made him pay bad. Now, here's an area of his game I'm going to watch really quick in camp. Because he's so fast, he's lightning quick. He'll leave a guy if he thinks a quarterback's running and come up and get the big smash hit. The problem with that is he's now in a league with a bunch of players, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, who can run full speed at the line of scrimmage, stop, not even set their feet, and throw the ball over your head. He's going to have to show discipline in his defense to not leave his guy till the quarterback's past the line of scrimmage. That's going to be hard for him. But I think there's a good shot. Matter of fact, I'll just say it on record. I think before the year's over, he starts for the Raiders. but I really like Jacorian Bennett. Again, another big playmaker, going to get interceptions, going to get fumbles. I like him a lot. A big, uh, fast, super good corner. Then you come in, the other corner is going to be a starter, Brandon Faison. Love Brandon. I was very critical of the regime for letting him go last year. I thought that was just a dumb move. For all you people that say I never criticize, I thought it was a dumb move, and it was. So I think they made it right. They went out and got him this year. Great addition. Just absolutely love Brandon Faison. He's a starting corner. And then let's just get to the next guy, Nate Hobbs. Nate did not have a good year last year. I'm looking forward to the start of mini camps. I'm going to ask Josh McDaniels about this early on in camp, in mini camp. But Nate was very promising as a rookie in the slot. Then last year they move him out on an island. It was not a good year for him. They need to put him back at the slot, leave him there. That's why you start Jacorian Bennett, start Nate Hobbs in the slot as your nickel guy, and then you go out and you put Brandon Faison in the other. That's clearly a better cornerback crew immediately, even with a rookie in Jacorian Bennett. Then you go out and you got a Meek Robertson, a guy makes a lot of great plays. And he makes big plays. And man, he's a great kid. I wish you all could get to know him. He's really a great kid. But he'll make some mistakes, and he's got to take that next step. Now, this is a crucial year for him. He's got to make that next step for the Raiders and prove that I'm a guy that earns being out there. Listen, Foster Moreau had to go. He'd make great plays, then have huge drops and huge mental errors. Meek's not as bad as Foster was. He'll make the big plays and then make some errors, not as bad as Foster did, but this is going to be a telling year for him. Then another guy interesting on the roster is David Long. This is a guy that could start. I think he's more of a depth guy, but he absolutely could start, that the Raiders brought in as a free agent. And then again, we've already talked about Nate Hobbs. Finally, there is a battle between Duke Shelley, a free agent, and Sam Webb, a UDFA from last year. I think they're battling for the last cornerback spot. I'm going to give the edge to Webb. I think Webb's going to earn that spot and hold him off. I know the Raiders would like to keep him there for salary cap issues. But they don't want to just keep him for salary cap. He's got to be able to play. And Webb showed some stuff last year that got some attention. So I expect Sam Webb to beat Duke Shelley for the last cornerback spot. Then let's get into some safeties. Trayvon Moehrig, really love him. Kid had an amazing rookie year. I gave a hot take last year that I thought he'd be an all-pro, and I made that after talking to not all, but all of my friends, not all the general managers, but a lot of my friends that are GMs and executives in the leagues and coaches. I said, hey, give me a young player that nobody's talking about from the Raiders. Everyone, Trayvon Moehrig. I know had the Raiders cut him this year, which I don't believe they would have. I'm not saying they were, but there were a lot of teams, because he didn't play well last year, that were ready to gobble him up. They felt like he was a victim of some poor coaching, that the Raiders didn't use him as well as they could have last year, same with Nate Hobbs. Clearly, Josh McDaniels made the decision to not make any changes on his staff and defensive back. I'm going to ask him about that. And I'm going to ask him, you saw two guys, Hobbs and Moehrig, that took steps backward. Hobbs, you played more on the outside, probably had his most success in the inside. What do you learn from that, and how do you fix it? But I love Moehrig. To me, that guy, he's a guy that was on the coaching staff. They've got to put him in better positions to succeed and have to coach him better. Then you come into another guy that I really like, rookie Chris Smith. Ball hawk, game changer from the University of Georgia. His best games were in the playoffs or the championship of the SEC. Big games, big results, big player. I expect him starting by the end of the year. And I would not be shocked, not at all, if him and Marcus Epps were the starting safeties at the beginning of the year. Probably not. I'm not predicting it. That's why I'm saying, but I wouldn't be shocked. But he's a guy, he's a big-time player. Great get by the Raiders. Great get. Now, again, another safety starter. Raiders stole this guy, Marcus Epps from the Eagles. Guy played phenomenal last year. You're like, Hondo, if he was so good, why did the Eagles want him back? Because they do such a good job of drafting. They've got guys behind him who aren't as good as him, but to pay him what he was worth would have put them in even more salary cap hell. So they take off a break in production. Their next guy isn't going to produce as big as Epps did, but man, this guy's a superstar. A couple of weeks ago, I did a podcast and I talked about building blocks and role players. I had Epps and Spillane as role players, but said I expect them both to be building blocks next year. Epps is the real deal. Huge upgrade at safety. Huge. You get him and Trayvon Moehrig together, and if for some reason Moehrig just isn't able to get it, you throw Chris Smith in there. This is just a really good Raiders safety room. Much better. They certainly have upgraded the safety position. Then you come around and you got a guy, another space guy, Jaquan Johnson, another depth guy, excuse me, not space. He's a guy I expect to make the roster. Solid safety, isn't a huge ball hawk, isn't a huge playmaker, but he's reliable. He's a steady Eddie. I expect him to make it. Another free agent signing by Dave Ziegler. Then the last safety I expect to make it is Roderick Teamer. Maybe you see an Epson Teamer starting. I mean, that's a definite possibility. And then you got, Moehrig and Smith. That would be there with Jaquan Johnson. But Roderick Teamer's a guy. Don't overlook him. Quality special teams player. I don't expect him to start, but he certainly, is a guy that could. Quality special teams player, though, and he's a quality person and a quality player. Then you start getting into the defensive tackles, where I expect the Raiders to take 5. Remember, they took a bunch of defensive ends also. The first one is John Jenkins. I really like Jenkins. Now, I told you guys in my podcasts during the draft, right after each day, and if you haven't seen him, I would encourage you to go back, that one of the things they loved about Byron Young was that he was a space eater on defense. He would get in and block up the middle. He was really good for the rushing attack. While not as high as Byron Young, Jade Nesta Silvera was a 7th-round pick that they got out of Arizona State, very similar. Jenkins is the same. Now, Jenkins isn't going to go get you the stats that I think you're going to get from a Byron Young, because Byron Young was in a different situation at Alabama. They didn't need him in there on pass rushing situations. I think Byron's going to get some sacks. I think he's going to do some more statistically than Jenkins. I don't expect Jenkins to start, but he's a space eater that you could see early on 1st and 2nd down, on the goal line, all of that. Then the next defensive tackle, again, I already mentioned Byron Young and the way that he eats space, is Bilal Nichols. Fully expect him back starting. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked at some point if it's Bilal Nichols and Byron Young starting. I really like Bilal. Glad the Raiders got him. He's a very solid. You know what you're going to get from him every time. Jerry Tillery, another defensive tackle I expect to make the roster. You may remember last year he made a really bonehead penalty that just really devastated the Raiders. All the talent in the world. If he could get it all together, this guy, there's no reason. He's got all the natural God-given talent to be a elite defensive tackle. He's got all of it. He just makes mistakes, and at times he doesn't think. I'm not implying he's stupid, because he's not. Don't you feel that way? Because I'm telling you, he's not. I wouldn't lie to you. I wouldn't say he was stupid. I just wouldn't call somebody that. But if I felt he was, I certainly wouldn't come out and tell you he isn't. I just would say nothing. He's not. He just, in the moment, in emotion, makes mistakes. But Jerry Tillery makes this roster, and the Raiders are better for having him. There's not anybody on the roster they're going to cut who's better than Tillery. They just have to work with him mentally, staying in the game. I know Max Crosby and him have built a good friendship, and I expect Max to really rub off on him in year 2. Then a guy that isn't getting a lot of talk, Jordan Willis. This is a unique guy. Excuse me, I need to take a drink. This is a guy, an underwhelming signing by Dave Ziegler. A lot of people didn't hoot and holler over this one. But I'm going to tell you what he offers. Remember, I've told you 100 times, the Raiders covet versatility. So this is a guy, he's 275 pounds. He can move to the inside and occasionally, in certain schemes, play defensive tackle. He can play defensive end and can stand up and play an outside linebacker. Again, certain situation. There's a lot of versatility there. I know the Raiders are intrigued by it. He's going to get a long, hard look in camp, and I expect him to make the team. And then last is Jade Nesta Silvera. Obviously, that means then that we're not going to see Matthew Butler or Neil Farrell make the squad. Certainly, I think it doesn't mean that they can't or couldn't end up in a different situation. But these are two guys that need to grow up, and that's not attacking their character. They're young men, and they need to grow up. They're not bad guys, but you saw last year when the Raiders needed them, they weren't even dressing them. Just no. So I think they're there. I think the Raiders are going to give them every chance, but I don't think either one is as good as Byron Young at all. I don't think either one of them can hold a candle to Byron Young. And I think Jade is better than both of them. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with those guys. Again, anything can change. Injuries. This is our way too early 53-man roster projection. And let's talk about some guys that I expect to make the practice squad. Running back Britton Brown. You may remember him. He was picked by the Raiders last year. Very versatile guy, but wasn't able to overtake Amir Abdullah or Brandon Bolden. So he's there on the practice. I expect David Agoha. He's an international player that will make, I think he'll make the practice squad as a defensive end. Dalton Wagner, the guy, the UDFA from Arkansas, expect him to make the practice squad. Ike Brown, the corner. Darian Butler, the linebacker. Tyler Hall, the corner. Jesper Horsted, the tight end. Now, I'm going to tell you something. A lot of people overlook Jesper Horsted, and I like this kid. I do. I generally like him as a kid. I like him as a player. O.J. Brown is consistently injured. So if O.J. Brown does not fix that, don't be shocked. I mentioned earlier when I was talking about O.J., I think O.J. hands above Jesper Horsted in the God-given talent. But Jesper Horsted stays healthy, and he's got the hunger and the want to. He's in a battle, and I think he'll lose to O.J. Brown. But I think they go to him and say, listen, OJ's never stayed healthy, and you'd be our third guy. Why don't you stick around? I think he's got a good shot. That's a guy, just keep your eye on him. I like Jesper. Then there's Curtis Bolton, the linebacker, and good one. And Christian Wilkerson, a wide receiver who was a free agent signing. Now, again, I expect other players to, that's not the holistic list of the practice squad. Obviously, Hunter Renfrow was listed, but I would expect once he's traded, and I think he will be, Philip Dorsett to pick up that fifth spot. Now, I want to again break down how I did it. In 2022, which was Ziegler and McDaniel's first year, they had 2 quarterbacks, 6 running backs and fullbacks, 5 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, 8 offensive linemen, 10 defensive linemen, 5 linebackers, 5 safeties, 6 corners, and 3 specialists. I have the Raiders this year taking 3 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 5 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, 8 offensive linemen, 11 defensive linemen, 5 linebackers, 5 safeties, 5 corners, and 3 specialists. So there you go. My way too early 53-man roster projection. I've gone through, I've talked about every player, what I think they offer, how I think they fit. Certainly there's a lot more to it. And it's certainly going to involve, because I told you at the very beginning, I don't expect this is the roster that the Raiders are going to enter the season with. I think that they would for sure, I think there's a couple positions. I think for linebacker, they would for sure like to add somebody. So maybe somebody gets cut. Maybe they're able to pick up a free agent that's still available or get a guy that's cut. In a trade, if they were to trade Hunter Renfrow, which I think they will, but I'm not reporting anything as imminent or anything like that. I think they would maybe take a player, but I think there's a good shot they would want some draft picks there. So a lot of great stuff. Let me know what you think. As always, thank you for watching our Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. I'm Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Raiders Today, part of the Fans First Sports Network. I hope you guys have a great Monday. God bless you, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon.